Today, we're going to be looking at a really awesome automation in which we can generate the entire script for a 20-minute podcast episode and then generate a conversation between two people all using AI.
So glad to have you here, Nadine. I've been really looking forward to this conversation because YouTube Shorts is just exploding right now. I feel like everyone wants to crack the code, but not many people actually know how to do it right.
With a click of a few buttons and just a couple of minutes, you'll have a ready podcast episode that you can then upload to your favorite podcasting platform. So let's go ahead and see how this works. And as you can see, we are populating the rows of our Airtable database with the entire dialogue. Let's go ahead into Airtable and see how that's looking. And you can see we are generating results one by one. Beautiful. So you have 19 dialogues between speaker 1 and speaker 2. Amazing. Now let's go back and go to part 2 of this beautiful scenario. And let's give that a run. And if we head over to Google Drive, we'll see that there is a new podcast episode created just now, and we are generating every single part of that podcast on the fly. Amazing. All right, I'm just going to hit stop for now. And if we were to let this whole scenario run, it would generate 19 different files for us, parts 1 through 19, which then we could throw into any simple audio editing software like Audacity and just clip them all together. And we would end up with a ready podcast episode. So let's dive in and see how we can how we can build this. So to do this, we are going to be using a software called Airtable. So I'm going to go ahead and clear. Let's go back out all the way. And now that we are in Airtable, we are going to go and hit create. You can just make a free account. And I'm going to go ahead and hit create. We can start from scratch. And let's go ahead and edit this field. We'll call this field speaker, single line text. We'll call this field the serial number because we do need to maintain the order of the files, and we can make this a number field. Perfect. And under assignee, instead of assignee, we can go ahead and call this the dialogue. Perfect. And this is a long text. Amazing. Okay, we don't need this last field, so we can go ahead and delete that. And our Airtable base is ready. Let's give this a name. Call it Auto Podcast. Perfect. And Airtable is pretty much ready to go. So now we need to go ahead and dive into make.com. So let's go ahead and start with a blank scenario. We can give this a name as well. Let's call this Auto Podcast Part 1. And this, in part 1, we are going to be using ChatGPT, or you can use DeepSeek or even Claude or whatever you want. And we are going to output the entire outline of the episode. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to stick with ChatGPT for now because that's what I have set up and it's working well for me. I'm going to create a completion. Make sure you have the right connection. If you don't have a connection, you can go ahead and click add and head over to platform.openai.com and grab your API key and insert that here. Perfect. The model is going to be 4.0 latest. Let's go ahead and give this a prompt. So we're going to add a message. The message is going to be from a user, and this is the prompt that we have. Now, I've already hard-coded the topics here, but instead of this, you can have the whatever you want to call your podcast. You can obviously change the name of the host. You can change what's going on. You can change the name of the guest. You can change what they're an expert in. And the rest of the prompt can remain the same. I've kept it 20 minutes for now, but obviously you can adjust that however that you want. And let's go ahead and add one more message. We're going to add a system message. And here we're going to tell it to output everything as JSON because we need to output it as JSON in order to see every object independently and to work with every dialogue independently. So I'm just going to go back and let's go ahead and get the system prompt. And oops, yeah, Let's go ahead and add our system prompt, and the output is going to be JSON in this format. You have to go to show advanced settings. The response format has to be JSON, and we do need to parse the response. Let's go ahead and hit save. And if that doesn't work, if you're getting the red circle, just go ahead and click on that again. Let everything load and just hit save one more time. Sometimes make.com misbehaves a little bit. Perfect. Okay, let's go ahead and hit save here as well. And let's run this and see what OpenAI comes up with. And if we go under output, under result, dialogue, and you will see that we have come up with 23 dialogues. So starting with Yusuf, this is and beautiful. We have all of the talking points as well. So what ChatGPT is actually done is instead of just point, it actually generated the dialogue, and that's fine. We're going to give it one more prompt in which we are going to kind of massage this dialogue and make it more conversational. So that's perfect. Okay, let's go ahead. And now what we want to do is we want to add something called an iterator. And what an iterator does is it takes a large list of objects and it's going to go through each and every one of them. So the array is going to be the dialogue, right? Perfect. And now what it's going to do is it's going to iterate over every single element inside dialogue. Now what we want to do is over every single element, we want to feed that back into ChatGPT and we want to make it more conversational. We want to make it more natural and more flowy. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, one question that might come up is why not just do that from the get-go? But I found that giving such a complex instruction from the get-go for 23 different pieces of text might not get you quite the result that you're looking for. So instead, it's just better to give it smaller chunks of text and ask it to output that. Let's go ahead and go back to 4.0 latest, and let's go ahead and grab our prompt. We want to add a message. Role is user, and the content is this. There's two things that we'll need to change here. The speaker is, we need to tell ChatGPT who is speaking, right? So the speaker is speaker from the iterator, and the script is the talking points. Perfect. Let's go ahead and now we want to add one more prompt in which we are going to give it instructions. Now the instructions are going to be with the developer system, and we're going to tell it, let's just make sure that our prompt is fine. So first we're going to have a user prompt, a user role with this prompt here. Remember to change these details in case your subject and your speaker and your subject matter is obviously going to be different. And let's go back down here that with the developer prompt, we're going to have a very detailed prompt in which we are going to instruct ChatGPT to make the output more human-like, something that would sound more like conversation rather than something that is, written or indeed, output by a machine. And we want to make sure that the response format is text, not JSON, because we're giving instructions to output as text only. So let's go ahead and hit save, and let's run that and see what happens. Okay, so you see it is indeed working through the outputs. I'm just going to stop this for now and let's just check what the outputs were. So we have this is the input, and you see we have a beautiful output right here. Perfect. Now all we have to do is we have to save this to Airtable. So let's go ahead into Airtable just to make sure that our table, everything is all set. And we're back into Make. And here, what we're going to do is we are going to add another module. And this time we're going to search for Airtable. And under Airtable, we are going to create a record. So for every iteration that we go through, we want to create a record. And now you're going to have to create a new Airtable connection. So I'm just going to go ahead and click Add. Connection type, you can just select OAuth, which is the easiest way to do it. Let's call this Airtable podcast connection. So it makes it easy for you to remember. Let's go ahead and hit save, and it's going to open a pop-up window. In this pop-up window, you want to grant access to whatever that you're looking for. So let's go ahead and click add a base, and it'll give you a list of all the bases that you have. So let's go ahead and select the one that we're working with, Auto Podcast YT, and let's go ahead and click grant access. Once that is saved, okay, so we get this message. We can just close this window and we're waiting for authorization. Let's just wait for that to finish. verifying connection. Perfect. So now that we have the base here, we just have to go ahead and select the table that we are working with. So auto podcast YT. Once we select that, we can go ahead and select the table that we're working in, table 1. That's fine. And that'll bring up the fields that we want to populate. So the speaker is the speaker from the iterator. The serial number is the bundle order position. And this is very important because we need this for our final output. And the dialog is going to be the result of the second ChatGPT completion. Right? So this result here, that is the dialog. Perfect. We can go ahead and hit save. Now let's save the entire workflow. Let's make sure it is indeed saving. Let's auto align everything. And let's run this just to make sure that everything is indeed showing up in Airtable. So just a couple of runs and we'll be able to see if the records are being generated. And once we have maybe 4 or 5 records, we can just go into the next step and start working with part 2. So we have 13 records generated. I'm just going to hit stop for now. This is more than enough to work with. So let's go ahead into Airtable and just see whether or not we have all of our records created. Perfect. We do have all 13 records. Let's just go ahead and hit refresh and see what the issue is. Perfect. So we have all of our records. That's fine. It's going to delete these extra ones. That's fine. And for serial number, since we're getting a decimal point, we can just go ahead and hit edit field, and we don't want any decimals, right? So we just go ahead and hit save, and that's perfect, right? And we have our beautiful dialogues between our two speakers. So we have 14 pieces of dialogue that we want to work, that we can now work with. Amazing. Now let's go back to make.com. This scenario is ready, so I'm just going to go back and let's start part 2. Okay, beautiful. Let's go ahead and build out a second part. So first off, let's give this a name, Auto Podcast YT Part 2. Beautiful. Now, first thing we're going to do here is we are going to go back into Airtable and we want to search for records, because we've already generated all of the records in Airtable. So we just go ahead and select the right connection. We have Airtable podcast connection. That's what we're looking for. The base is Auto Podcast. And the table is table 1. And we want to select all output fields, right? Okay, perfect. Select the grid view as well. Perfect. Let's go ahead. And we don't want to limit here. So let's just go ahead and leave this blank. And this should output all of the records in that table. Let's go ahead and hit save. Let's run that once and see what we get. So perfect. We have all of these bundles. We should have 14 because we do indeed have 14 dialogues in our table. So that's all of the dialogues. So we have the speaker, we have the serial number, and we have the dialogue as well. So we can't directly access all of these records. What we now need to do is we need to aggregate all of these. And we're going to do that using a special tool called an array aggregator. So let's go ahead and search for aggregator. Perfect. So what the aggregator does, it's going to take everything from this output and aggregate all of that into one single, into more structured data that then we can then iterate over. Let's go ahead and hit save. Let's run that once to see what the output is so we know what we're working with. And now we see we have all of these different outputs. We have one array with all of these elements inside that. Beautiful. So now we have to open an iterator. And now that iterator is going to iterate over every single element that we aggregated. Right? Might seems a little complicated, but that's just the way that Airtable does the outputs. So go ahead and hit. We want to click array. Perfect. I'm going to iterate over the array. And now what we want to do is we want to add something called a router. So since we have two speakers, we want to actually generate a separate file for each speaker because we're going to have two separate voices. So we're going to go into something into flow control and add something called a router. Now what the router does is it splits the step into step one, step two, and you can really add as many routes as you need to. And what we're going to do is we're going to add filters, and those filters will check who the speaker is. And based on who the speaker is, we are going to change where the data is next going to go. So here we can go ahead and click here. If you just click on the dots, we are going to add a filter. So let's just go ahead and see that's called this ship, since that's the name that we're working with. The condition is the speaker equals to case insensitive. Let's call this user. Perfect. Now let's call this name. So the condition is the speaker equals to case insensitive Nadine. Perfect. And you'd have to change these names obviously based on whatever names that you're using. So there is one step that we have to add that I forgot. So first thing we want to do here is want to add another module, and let's go to Google Drive, and we want to create a folder for our new episode. Let's go ahead and create a folder. Choose the right connection that you're working with. And so the location is my drive, and just you can choose whichever folder that you want to save this into. The new folder name is going to be new podcast episode. Right, perfect. And let's go ahead and hit save. Perfect. So now what we need to do, if the speaker is Yusef, we want to go to 11 Labs and create a speech synthesis. So now that we have our router ready and we have the dialogues ready as well, the next step is to start generating the text. Now, to generate the text, we're going to be using an amazing tool called 11 Labs. So you can go ahead to 11labs.io, or the link will be in the description, and you can create a free account. And the free account, I believe, will give you enough credits just to get started. But in order to generate some more lengthy podcast episodes, you can start with their cheapest plan, which is like $5 a month. So now that we are logged into 11 Labs, let's go ahead and click on our name. We're going to go to API keys. And we are going to need to create an API key. I already have one, and my connection was already set up, so I can skip that part for now. So we can go back into make.com. Let's go ahead and click add, and we want to add 11 labs. And here we want to create a speech synthesis. And if you already don't have a connection set up, you will need to add a connection. In order to add that connection, give it a name and paste that API key that you just got. Perfect. Now you have to choose a number. They have a number of voices that you can choose from. And you can actually add to this list of voices by going back into 11 Labs and going to My Voices and choosing which ones that you want. But since we just have one male and one female, I'm just going to use any male voice here. So the first one that we have is Roger. That's fine. The model is 11 Multilingual V2. This is one of the fastest ones that they have. You can also use English if you're just using English. So let's go ahead and just use multilingual. And the text is going to be the dialogue from the iterator, right? And that's basically it. That's all that we need to do. So let's go ahead and hit save. Okay. And the next thing that we have to do once 11 Labs generates the audio is to go ahead and save that audio. Let's go ahead and go back to Google Drive, and we want to we need to upload a file into Google Drive. So just make sure that you have the right connection. The folder ID is when we select from a list. We want a map, and that new folder is the folder that we created in this step here, right? So we're just going to go ahead and click folder ID, and the file is the 11 Labs file that we created here. Perfect. Now, when 11 Labs generates a file, the names are not, the names are fairly random. So what we need to do is we need to change the name of the file. We can go back to Google Drive, and now we need to rename a file. We need to update a file, right? So let's go ahead and click update a file. And the file that we are going to update is we just have to reference the previous Google Drive module that we created. The file ID is select from a list. My drive. Oops, enter manually. That's what we need. The file ID is the file ID that we uploaded here, right? File ID. The new updated file name is podcast part. And we scroll down and we find the bundle order position or the serial number. That's what we're looking for, right? So the serial number, podcast part, whatever that we have reached. And we don't need to change any of the file content. We just need to change the file name. So let's go ahead and hit save. And if you're seeing this red dot, you can just click on that, let everything load, and just hit save one more time. Perfect. Now, so part one of this is ready. Now we just need to do the same thing for Nadine. So a neat trick that you can do is you can hit the shift key. Just select all of these modules because we're just going to be repeating that. I'm going to go copy modules. Let's go ahead and paste. Perfect. And let's go ahead and drag this here. And we can go ahead and delete this module. And you can see that since we copied it, the filter also got copied. So we just need to change that filter. Oops. Let's go ahead and click here. The speaker should be native. Perfect. And everything else is all the same, right? Because the only thing that we still have to change is the voice. So instead of a male voice, let's go ahead and select a female voice for Nadine. Okay, Arya is fine for now. Let's go ahead and hit save. Save the entire scenario, auto line everything, and let's go ahead and run this and see. Okay, so we seem to be getting an error. Let's go ahead and see what the issue is. Let's just go ahead and choose 11 Turbo for now. Sometimes the issue is that the voice is not compatible with that particular model. So I'm just going to change that and see if that works. Okay, let's go ahead and run that and see if it works this time. Perfect. So we did create a speech synthesis. We are now uploading the file into Google Drive. Then we're going to update that file. So let's go back into Google Drive and see all of these podcast episodes as they are being generated. So this is the latest one that we're working with. Okay, so the issue that we're running into here is that our Google Drive command is after the iterator. So we actually need to move that before the iterator. Otherwise, it's going to end up creating a new folder every single time it iterates over a dialog. So let's go ahead and connect these two. And let's unlink this and add the Google Drive thing here. And kudos to you if you already picked this up when we were building the scenario out. So now if we open our Google Drive, we are indeed creating new files, podcast part 1, and hopefully we'll see that there will be podcast part 2 as well. Podcast part 2. And you'll notice that it changes because sometimes there's a little bit of a lag between the time the file is uploaded and the time the file is renamed. But you'll see that the file does indeed get renamed. So we have all of our podcasts ready. And then we can go ahead and just stop this scenario for now. We don't need to use up all of our 11 Labs credits. And let's pop over to Google Drive and give this a listen.
So glad to have you here, Nadine. I've been really looking forward to this conversation because YouTube Shorts is just exploding right now. I feel like everyone wants to crack the code, but not many people actually know how to do it right. You've grown multiple channels past 1 million views.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for having me, Youssef. Super excited to be here and dive into all things YouTube Shorts. Honestly, it's one of my favorite topics to talk about because the platform is just evolving so fast. Like, the growth potential right now is insane.